started crying a little bit and said he wishes he hadn't done it, and then kept going around and just doing stuff, I think, to keep himself busy or distracted or something. And then eventually said that he would talk to his parents or turn himself over.
All right, welcome back to ARC Salt Lake on your Friday morning. It is 7:16 right now. That was some of the most anticipated testimony from the preliminary hearing in the Tyler Robinson case. That was Lance Twiggs, the former roommate of Tyler Robinson and romantic partner. Joining us now to discuss all of this, our legal analyst, Skye Lazaro. Skye, thanks for joining me this morning. I appreciate it.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. So this was definitely some of the most anticipated testimony. How do you think it all played out? Because I've seen a lot of coverage on this.
Really, at this preliminary hearing phase, this is what everybody was waiting to hear, is what was Lance Twiggs going to say about the things that Tyler Robinson either said to him or texted to him, because Lance doesn't have to testify or be cross-examined. This information can just be offered for the state, really to show Mr. Robinson's words.
Can you hear? Sorry, Skye.
Yeah,
we had an
sorry.
audio issue there. Why was the defense here trying to not have this be made public?
Really, because at this preliminary hearing phase, the problem is we're not at a trial. So at some point, we're still going to have to probably seat a jury in this case. And what the defense is trying to preclude is to have this information be put out without them being able to cross-examine Mr. Twiggs. So Lance Twiggs was able to put this statement out that was procured by the state under immunity, show these text messages, and then the defense didn't have an opportunity to cross-examine him. So it really just puts out one side of the story to the public. And that can be really damaging to the defense in these cases, especially when down the road you would have the opportunity to cross-examine him. And some of this may or may not be evidence at trial.
Was anything that Lance said surprising or shocking in your view? Did we learn anything, like any bombshell revelations?
I think most of it we knew based on the probable cause statement that the state submitted when they filed this case. They talked about a bunch of text messages and just included that text. And here at the preliminary hearing, they actually produced those text messages. At a trial phase, they're going to have to get over the evidentiary burden of having to lay foundation to authenticate them. But here, where we're just taking everything in a light most favorable to the state, really what this did is just set forth what we pretty much already knew. I did find it interesting where he talked about how Mr. Robinson was acting before and after he was alleged to have killed Mr. Kirk. So I think we learned a few things there. But for the most part, this is mostly information the state had already put out.
And let's talk about the hearing as a whole up to this point. I did talk with you on Monday, I believe, or maybe it was Tuesday actually, but as a whole, as we enter day 5 now, have we learned anything revelatory, or has it all been sort of expected in your view?
I think it's been mostly expected. It was really interesting to see really the state's theory in this case of how it played out. We did get a glimpse, I think, into maybe what the defense will be able to argue or be looking to argue down the road. But I feel most of this evidence that was put forth was pretty expected. The state didn't go too far out on a limb and really just covered their bases in terms of satisfying the elements that they need to for this probable cause standard. The defense did get into some pretty good cross-examination regarding the ballistics and ballistic testing that I think we'll probably see more of to see if that information or that evidence really can withstand the test at a trial level.
So we're entering day 5 now. What can we expect for today? Is there a chance this goes beyond today as well?
As far as evidence, it sounds like both sides, the state and the defense, will finish up today. We're not going to get a decision from the judge today, however. The parties are going to take this issue. They're going to get a transcript. They're going to submit briefing on it, given the amount of information that was provided over the last 5 days. So we won't get a decision on this until after oral argument sometime in September.
Okay, that's certainly a question a lot of people wondering. When would we expect a decision from the judge? You're saying that's still quite a ways away.
Yeah, that's still going to be a ways out. What the defense asked for was to be able to provide legal argument and briefing to summarize the evidence, be able to argue their take on it. So the way a briefing schedule works is the state gets an opportunity to file their brief. The defense will get to respond. And because it's the state's burden at the preliminary hearing phase and really throughout all phases of a criminal trial, they get the last word. So we're looking at about 5-6 weeks, and then it's set for an oral argument. So both parties will have the opportunity to summarize their arguments before the judge at that next hearing date in September. And I would expect either a ruling at that time or shortly thereafter.
How do you think the prosecution has done with this preliminary hearing?
I think the prosecution has done a pretty good job of laying out their case. I mean, we have to remember we're at a preliminary hearing phase, so they really just have to establish probable cause. They laid out the timeline. They set the scene. They called the witnesses that they need to tie the weapon to Mr. Robinson. We saw some video footage that I don't believe anyone had seen, at least the public had not seen before, and some other testimony. I think the state's going to get a bind over on this case. I don't think that's probably a close call given the low standard.
Mm-hmm. Tell me how you think the defense has done. I know this is not a trial, it's a preliminary hearing, so maybe the amount of legal maneuvering they could do isn't that large, but how do you think they have done through this?
I think the defense has done a wonderful job in defending their client and protecting their client's rights at all phases of this. We saw a lot of objections. They did everything they could to limit the amount of testimony that came in, the way it came in, to try to protect what they could from being disseminated to the public, and really went to bat for Mr. Robinson. This is a death penalty case, and they have fought everything each and every step of the way, calling witnesses to really kind of rebut what the state was putting forward with some of this forensic evidence. So in terms of a preliminary hearing, I don't think you could ask any more of defense attorneys. They have really done a good job for Mr. Robinson.
I touched on this on Tuesday. I think it's worth touching on it again because people who are watching the coverage of this preliminary hearing, and they're not into the weeds here, they see a court proceeding and they think, trial, but explain how this really is just a different phase of this whole saga.
Right. In this case has really been different than a lot of cases, even national media cases that we've seen, because usually we don't get to see any of these evidence until we get to trial. And then we're dealing with a higher standard, different evidentiary rules that make it more difficult to get evidence before the court and before the public. Really at a preliminary hearing phase, and this has been the defense's argument all along as to why this should not be televised, why it shouldn't be live streamed, because some of this evidence is presented may or may not be admitted at trial. At this phase, they can use hearsay, they can use recorded statements, they can use written statements as long as they comply with the rules. At a trial phase, those people will have to come and testify, and they'll have to be subject to cross-examination. The other difference here is that everything is taken in a light most favorable to the state.
Okay.
So the judge really isn't weighing credibility.
All right, Skye Lazaro, thank you so much for talking to us about this case. I know there's a lot of interest, so we appreciate your expertise. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, time right now is 7:26. A reminder, you can stay on the latest news, weather, traffic, sports, including all of the information in the Tyler Robinson case by downloading the KUTV 2 News app. Scan the QR code right there. That will take you to the download process.